Welcome to your Tech and AI Daily for June 3rd. And today, we did the homework. Every story here has been fact-checked against the original reporting because a lot of what is circulating online is not quite right. Coming up, SpaceX's record-shattering IPO, a surveillance scandal brewing inside Meta, billions of dollars in fresh startup funding, Microsoft's bold quantum claim, China's chip workaround, and the biggest moves across AI. Let's get into it. We start with the biggest financial story of the year. SpaceX has officially filed for what would become the largest IPO in history. It is targeting around $75 billion in proceeds at a staggering $1.75 trillion valuation, and it will list under the ticker SPCX, with pricing expected around June 11th. To put that in perspective, at $75 billion, this would be roughly 2.5 times the size of the previous record holder, Saudi Aramco. Now, you may have seen headlines that SpaceX lost $4.9 billion last year. That is technically true, but deeply misleading. That loss came almost entirely from its acquisition of xAI, which burned through roughly $14 billion. The core SpaceX business is highly profitable. Starlink alone generated $11.4 billion in revenue and over $4 billion in operating profit. That said, not everyone is buying the price tag. Analysts at Morningstar pegged the company's fair value at under half the asking valuation, calling it significantly overvalued. Next, a privacy storm is brewing inside Meta. Through an internal program called the Model Capability Initiative, or MCI, Meta is reportedly recording how its own employees work in extraordinary detail. We're talking about employees' email and chat contents, their code changes, browsing history, even the URLs they copy to their clipboard, all captured to train Meta's AI agents. Now, it is officially limited to US devices. But here's the catch. When a US employee messages a colleague in Dublin or Paris, that conversation gets swept in two, putting the whole program on a collision course with European privacy law. Internally, staff reportedly described it as dystopian. Meta's response? It says safeguards are in place to protect sensitive content, and that the data will not be reused for any other purpose. The bigger picture. As companies race to build AI agents that can replace knowledge work, the most valuable dataset is a high-fidelity recording of how knowledge workers actually work. And the cheapest place to get that is your own staff. All right, let's talk money. It was a massive week for startup funding, especially in AI and infrastructure. Every single round you are about to hear has been verified against the original announcements. Leading the pack, DriveNets, an Israeli company building high-speed Ethernet networking for AI data centers, raised a huge $410 million Series D. That pushed its valuation to $8.5 billion, and notably, chipmaker AMD joined as a strategic investor. Next, defense startup Mach Industries pulled in $300 million, quadrupling its valuation to $1.8 billion in a single year as it builds unmanned strike systems for the Pentagon. And out of Nairobi, Spiro raised $215 million. That is the largest African electric vehicle round ever, and it will fund e-motorcycles and battery swapping stations across the continent. There was plenty more. Mecha AI raised $60 million to capture real human motion data and train robots. Endra, a Stockholm startup, raised $50 million from Andreessen Horowitz to automate the unglamorous but enormous work of building design. Adaptive Innovations also landed $50 million for an AI-native home healthcare platform. Subtle Medical took $33 million for AI that speeds up medical scans. And Findigs raised $32 million for AI that screens tenants and underwrites apartment leases. The common thread? Almost every dollar is chasing applied AI in a specific industry. Two brand new venture funds are also turning heads. First, Gigascale Capital, founded by former Meta Chief Technology Officer Mike Schroepfer, closed a $250 million fund. Its focus is the physical economy, clean energy, the power grid, and AI applied to building real-world systems. It is a contrarian bet, landing while most of venture capital is piling into software. And second, investor Ethan Choi is leaving Khosla Ventures to launch his own firm, called Adamus. He is reportedly out raising a growth stage fund of at least $500 million. Okay, now to the biggest headlines in tech. And there is a lot to get through. First up, Apple has a genuine surprise hit on its hands. The new MacBook Neo is Apple's cheapest laptop ever, starting at just $599, and it runs an iPhone-class chip instead of the usual M series. In its debut quarter, with only about 3 weeks of sales, it moved 1.1 million units. That beat the entire launch quarters of both the M5 MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro. Tim Cook says it drove a record number of first-time Mac buyers, and demand actually outran supply, led by the United States. The big takeaway: by undercutting its own laptop lineup by 45%, analysts think Apple could leap from around 2% to 15% of the budget notebook market. Next, a story that perfectly captures this moment in tech. Uber blew through its entire annual AI budget in just 4 months. So now, it is capping spending at $1,500 per month per tool on agentic coding assistants like Cursor and Claude Code. And here's the irony. This is the very same company that had been running internal leaderboards, ranking employees and pushing them to use AI as much as humanly possible. Even Uber's own chief operating officer now admits it is very hard to draw a line between AI usage and actual shipped products. It is the clearest sign yet of the industry's reckoning with AI return on investment. Now, to quantum computing. Microsoft unveiled its Majorana 2 chip and made a bold promise, a commercially useful quantum computer by 2029, half its earlier timeline. By swapping aluminum for lead, which shields the chip from radiation, Microsoft claims a 1,000-fold jump in qubit stability, pushing qubit lifetimes from milliseconds to around 20 seconds. Impressive, but here is the reality check. The chip has just 12 qubits. The results have not been peer-reviewed. They were released by press release. And physicists point out that key measurements needed to prove the technology are simply missing. Remember, Microsoft had to retract a major quantum paper back in 2021. So while it races down a riskier path than IBM and Google, many scientists want real, reviewed proof before they believe that 2029 promise. OpenAI, meanwhile, is pushing its Codex tool far beyond coding. It just launched 6 new plugins aimed at data analysts, salespeople, product designers, creatives, and even finance professionals. OpenAI says Codex now has more than 5 million weekly active users, up 6 times since February, and crucially, non-developers are now its fastest-growing group, growing 3 times faster than coders. It also rolled out 2 new features, Sites, which turns whatever Codex builds into a hosted, interactive website, and Annotations, which lets you point at a specific part of a document for precise edits. The message is clear. OpenAI wants Codex to be a general assistant for all white-collar work, not just programming. Staying with Microsoft, it also launched Scout, an always-on AI assistant. And here is the interesting part. It is built on OpenClaw, the viral open-source agent framework. Scout keeps a persistent memory, learns your preferences over time, and works across Outlook, Teams, and Microsoft 365, doing things like rescheduling conflicting meetings and drafting your follow-ups automatically. Because OpenClaw is third-party open-source code, Microsoft is being careful. It sandboxes Scout as untrusted and runs a policy system that audits every single action it takes. For now, it is rolling out only to early access enterprise customers with a Copilot subscription. Now, to geopolitics. A new report claims China's military has been acquiring NVIDIA AI chips despite years of U.S. export controls. Investigators reviewed about 3,800 procurement records and found more than 500 cases between 2019 and 2025 where Chinese military units sought NVIDIA chips, including the A100 and H100. The intended uses are not subtle. Nuclear blast simulations, wargaming, and offensive cyber operations, with China's cyber forces the single biggest buyer. Now, an important nuance. These records show what the military requested, not necessarily what was delivered. But the method is telling. They lowered technical specs and routed orders through shell companies and resellers, the clearest sign yet that the export curbs leak. And speaking of China's AI push, DeepSeek is closing in on its first ever round of outside funding. We are talking about roughly $7.4 billion at a valuation of up to $59 billion. If it closes, that would make DeepSeek China's most valuable AI startup, though still a fraction of US rivals like OpenAI. The biggest backers are tech giant Tencent and battery maker CATL, and remarkably, founder Liang Wenfeng is putting in $2.9 billion of his own money. One caveat though, the deal is still in talks, and terms could change before it is final. And finally, a major policy shift. President Trump signed a deliberately narrow AI executive order. Under it, companies are asked, not required, to submit their most advanced models for government review 30 days before release. That is down from the 90 days first proposed. Critically, the order explicitly bans any mandatory licensing, approval, or pre-clearance for AI models. It also directs the Justice Department to prioritize AI-assisted crimes, like hacking. This is a sharp reversal from the previous administration's order, which had set binding, mandatory safety testing requirements. After industry pushback over losing the race to China, this version was watered down and signed quietly. And that is your fact-checked tech and AI brief for June 3rd. SpaceX is days from the largest IPO ever. Meta is facing a data privacy reckoning. Billions are pouring into applied AI and infrastructure, and Microsoft, OpenAI, and China are all making big bets. Thanks for watching. If this was useful, follow along, and I will see you tomorrow with the next rundown.